Hello and welcome back to the Limitless Performer Podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things well-being for performers. If you joined me for episode 1, you'll know we kicked things off by talking about burnout in drama school. I've had such kind messages since then, even a little traction over on TikTok, which has been really fun to see. Honestly, I have no idea how many of you actually made it from TikTok to the podcast itself, but if you're here listening right now, I would love to know how you found me. Today we're diving into a topic that so many performers experience but rarely talk about out loud: imposter syndrome. That feeling of waiting to be found out, like you're not good enough to be here even though you are, that you've only got this role or this place in drama school because of luck or a mistake rather than talent or hard work. If that rings a bell, you are not alone. Also, I'm sorry if there's any background noise during this episode. The wind is going crazy today and my windows are rattling, so I'll try and edit it out as much as I can. In this episode, we'll look at what imposter syndrome really is, why it shows up so often in performers, some of the science behind it, and of course some tools and tips to help you move through it. And like always, I'll share a bit of my own experience along the way. So, let's get into it. The term imposter syndrome was first introduced back in 1978 by two psychologists, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. They were studying high-achieving women who, despite having plenty of evidence of their abilities, constantly felt like frauds. These women were getting awards, promotions, recognition, but inside they thought, I don't deserve this. I've somehow tricked everyone. Any day now they'll find out I'm not good enough. And maybe that sounds familiar to you already, but what's fascinating is that Clance and Imes thought this was quite a specific phenomenon at the time. But decades later, research has shown that imposter syndrome shows up everywhere, across genders, cultures, and industries. It doesn't discriminate. Some studies suggest that up to 70% of people will experience imposter feelings at some point in their life. So if you felt it, you are definitely not alone. What does it actually look like in everyday life? Researchers have identified a few common patterns. Firstly, perfectionism. This is the one where you believe that unless something is flawless, it's basically a failure. You might spend hours polishing a monologue or preparing for an audition, but instead of thinking, I did well, you think, I could have done better. I missed that line, I didn't land that beat. The bar just keeps moving further away. This is so relatable for me. I could get one of the top marks in class, say an 88, and instead of celebrating, my brain would go straight to, why didn't I get a 90? What's wild is that at the very same time, I could genuinely feel proud and excited for my friends who got lower marks. It's like the compassion that I had for others didn't extend to myself. Secondly, discounting achievements. Maybe you get great feedback after a performance, or you land a role that you worked hard for. Instead of letting yourself celebrate, you brush it off. Oh, it wasn't really that good. Anyone could have done it. You minimize the achievement as if it doesn't count. And thirdly, attributing success to luck. This one is so common in performers. You get chosen, but instead of believing it's because you had the right skill, talent, or presence, you tell yourself it must have been a fluke, or you've been typecast. I only got in because they needed someone last minute. They probably picked me because of how I look, not because of my talent. But these patterns keep us in a loop. We work harder and harder to prove ourselves, but no amount of evidence is enough to quiet the voice that says, I'm not actually good enough. I don't belong here. Now, why is imposter syndrome so particularly prevalent for performers? Well, performing arts is basically a breeding ground for imposter feelings. Think about it. Firstly, feedback is totally subjective. In maths, 2 + 2 = 4. There's a right answer. In performing, one casting director loves your audition, another thinks that you're not right. One teacher praises your voice, another critiques your technique. There's no universal measure of good, which means it's so easy to doubt yourself. Second, there's constant comparison. You're surrounded by peers, castmates, classmates, who are all just as talented and ambitious and hardworking as you are. And in drama school especially, you're being assessed side by side, so it's nearly impossible not to think, he's so much more confident than I am, or she can belt higher than I can, or they just seem to get it more easily than I do. And then of course there's rejection. In performing, rejection isn't the exception. I'm sure you all know this. You go to 20 auditions and you hear no from 19 of them. And even when you finally get a yes, it's so easy to just believe that it was a mistake or just luck. The cycle makes imposter feelings incredibly sticky. So now we've defined imposter syndrome and seen how it shows up in performers, let's talk about the science behind it. Why imposter syndrome isn't just in your head, it actually has really clear links to how our brain and body respond to stress. When imposter syndrome is triggered, your body often flips into what's called stress response. That's the classic fight, flight, freeze, fawn system, where your brain detects a threat and pumps out stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Now, unfortunately, your body doesn't really know the difference between a lion chasing you and walking into an audition room. To your nervous system, both feel dangerous. That's why imposter thoughts can trigger physical symptoms. A racing heart, shaky hands, dry mouth, or even that brain fog where you suddenly forget your lines. It's not because you're unprepared, it's because your body thinks you're in danger. Another important piece of psychology here is self-efficacy. This is a concept from psychologist Albert Bandura, and it basically means that your belief in your ability to succeed at a specific task. If you believe, I can do this, you're far more likely to step up, focus, and perform well. If you don't believe it, your brain gets stuck in doubt, and your performance often suffers, not because you lack the skill, but because your belief system is undermining you. Imposter syndrome chips away at self-efficacy. You do have the ability, but the voice in your head says you don't. So even when you succeed, you don't fully absorb the evidence. You don't let it build your confidence. Instead, you keep feeding the loop of doubt. Now, for performers especially, this gets even more complicated because of identity. Most people can celebrate what I do from who I am. But if you're a performer, it's often more than a job. It is your identity, your passion, the thing you've been working towards since you were a child. This means rejection or self-doubt doesn't feel like I didn't do well at this one task. It feels like I'm not enough as a person. I will do an entire episode about performing being part of your life instead of your whole life at some point in the future. But then add in the fact that in this industry, your progress is judged almost entirely through external validation. Auditions, casting panels, directors, teachers, you're constantly being told yes or no by other people. So when you already have imposter feelings, it's like pouring petrol on the fire. Every rejection feels like proof that your fears were right, and even the wins feel fragile, like they'll be taken away. So to summarize, imposter syndrome isn't just a thought pattern. It's something that activates your stress response, undermines your belief in your own abilities, and hooks into your identity in a really personal way. Which is why it feels so powerful, and why it matters that we learn how to work with it and not against it. I want to share a little bit of my own experience with imposter syndrome, because I think sometimes we assume that once you're experienced, you've reached a certain point, those feelings just vanish, but they don't. Right now, I've just started my MSc in Dance Science Research, and while I'm so interested in the subject, it combines everything I care about: performance, well-being, the science behind how we move and train. I've definitely been feeling imposter syndrome coming in. I'm in a cohort of students who've studied science, physiology, or data analysis before, and they're throwing around terms and statistical methods that I've barely touched. And honestly, I sat there thinking, what am I doing here? Did they make a mistake letting me onto the course? Or did my application somehow convince them that I'm someone I'm not, someone smarter, more capable, more qualified? And the funny thing is, I've felt that same voice before, all through drama school. Imposter syndrome was a constant companion. I'd look around at my peers and think, they're so much more talented than I am. If we were in a singing performance workshop, I'd be caught up in thoughts like, I'll never be as confident as them, and I don't belong here. And because I was one of the youngest people on the course, I'd always think that that made me the most inexperienced. What I didn't realise at the time is while I was busy doubting myself, other people were looking at me and wishing that they could pick up choreography the way I could. They were insecure of their age and thought that being older was a disadvantage. We were all so wrapped up in our own insecurities that we couldn't see what we brought to the table. And now, in this new MSc class, when I catch myself feeling like the odd one out, I've been reminding myself of that same lesson. Yes, my classmates might know more about data analysis, but how much do they know about Stanislavski or Sondheim or the entire cast recording of Anything Goes, both Patty and Sutton's versions? Now I know Stanislavski is not going to help me with statistics, but that's the thing. We all bring different strengths, different knowledge, and different experiences. The danger of imposter syndrome is that it makes us discount our own expertise while magnifying everyone else's. So if you've ever felt that way, whether it's in training, in rehearsals, or like me stepping into a brand new environment, you are not alone. It doesn't mean you're not talented, capable, or deserving. And here's the truth, imposter syndrome doesn't vanish when you achieve something new. Sometimes it gets louder because every new challenge shines a light on areas we don't know yet. But that doesn't erase the skills, the strengths, the artistry that you already bring. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this. Those feelings don't mean you don't belong. They're just feelings, and like any feeling, they can be understood, managed, and worked through. Now, I mentioned this quickly earlier, but why does imposter syndrome feel extra strong in performers? The truth is, the performing arts are the perfect environment for it to take a hold. Firstly, there's a sheer level of competition. From the moment you audition for drama school, you're up against hundreds of people who all want the same spot. Then, once you're in training, you're surrounded by equally talented, hard-working classmates. And later, in the industry, every audition feels like you're being compared side to side with dozens of other performers. That constant comparison feeds the thought that they're better and I don't belong. Second, unlike many other careers, there aren't clear metrics for success. In school, you take a test, you get a grade. In sports, you can measure your time or your score. But in performing, success is so subjective. One teacher loves your energy, another says you're too much. One casting director praises your choices, another critiques them, or worse, you just don't fit the jigsaw. Without solid, objective benchmarks, it's easy to think that your wins are down to luck and your rejections are a reflection of your worth. This also ties into the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic goals. Most of the goals in performing are extrinsic, meaning they rely on someone else saying yes. Getting into drama school, signing with an agent, being cast in a show. You can do all the work, but the final decision is in someone else's hands. Contrast that with an intrinsic goal, like improving your jump height by 5 centimeters, or building your vocal stamina so you can sustain a note longer. Those are measurable, personal, and entirely within your control. But because the industry is so outcome-driven, we often forget to set those intrinsic goals, which makes it much harder to feel confident in our progress. And then there's the culture of rejection. In most careers, rejection is an occasional thing. In performing, it's part of the job. For every yes, there might be 20 no's, and because rejection is so normalized, we rarely stop to process it in healthy ways. We brush it off, we tell ourselves it's just how the industry works, but underneath there's no add up. They become fuel for imposter syndrome. See, I knew I wasn't good enough. Putting all of this together, the constant competition, the lack of clear metrics, the goals tied to other people's decisions, and a culture of rejection, you get the perfect storm for imposter syndrome. It's not that performers are less capable, it's that the very structure of the industry amplifies the voice that says I'm not enough. And that's exactly why this conversation matters, because if we can understand the conditions that make imposter syndrome thrive, we can start to challenge them and protect our own sense of belonging. So, let's get to the good stuff. What can we actually do about imposter syndrome? Because the goal isn't to make those feelings vanish completely. They're human and they'll pop up from time to time, but to build tools so that when they do show up, you know how to handle them. Here are 5 strategies that really help. 1. Cognitive reframing. One of the first steps is simply noticing your self-talk. Imposter syndrome thrives on a loop of thoughts like, I don't belong here, I'm not good enough, I just got lucky. These thoughts feel automatic, but they're not facts, they're interpretations. Cognitive reframing means catching that negative loop and challenging it with something more balanced and realistic. For example, instead of, they made a mistake letting me in, you could reframe to, I was accepted because I bring unique strengths, even if I still have things to learn. Psychologically, this works because our brains are wired to believe what we repeat. By consciously replacing distorted thoughts with realistic affirmations, we weaken the grip of imposter beliefs over time. It's not about cheesy, I'm amazing mantras. It's about shifting to thoughts that are true and constructive. Tip number 2 is keeping an evidence log. Our brains have a bias. They tend to discount positives and fixate on negatives. That's why one rejection can wipe out the memory of 5 compliments. An evidence log is a simple but powerful counter to this bias. It's just a notebook, a note on your phone, or even a folder where you record your wins, feedback from a teacher, a role that you landed, a compliment from a friend, or even just moments that you felt proud in class. Then, when imposter thoughts creep in, you have tangible evidence to look back on. I'm not good enough? Well, here's a list of moments that say otherwise. Research shows that recalling past mastery experiences strengthens self-efficacy. Bandura's idea that belief in our ability directly influences performance. So, keeping an evidence log isn't fluffy. It's rewiring your brain to remember that you can do this. Tip number 3 is mentorship and community. Imposter syndrome thrives in isolation. When you're in your own head, it feels like you're the only one struggling. But when you actually talk to your peers or your mentors, you realize almost everyone feels this way at some point. Reaching out to mentors, teachers, or even classmates can normalize the struggle. A mentor might share their own imposter experiences and how they navigated them. A peer might admit, honestly, I've felt that too. That sense of belonging dismantles the illusion that you're uniquely flawed. From a psychological standpoint, this is social validation. When others mirror your feelings, the shame lessens. And shame is the fuel for imposter syndrome. Remove the shame and the fire dims. The 4th tip is self-compassion practice. This is a big one. Dr. Kristen Neff's research shows that self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness that you'd give a friend, significantly reduces shame and self-criticism. When you hit a setback, instead of spiraling into, I'm useless, I'll never get this, self-compassion looks like, this is tough and it's okay to struggle. Struggle is a part of being human and it doesn't define my worth. Why does this work? Because shame isolates us and tells us we're defective. Self-compassion reconnects us with humanity. Everyone struggles, and that doesn't make you less deserving. It creates emotional resilience so you can bounce back instead of getting stuck in self-doubt. And finally, number 5, let's not forget the body. Imposter thoughts don't just live in the mind, they're amplified when the nervous system is overloaded. A lack of sleep, poor nutrition, or constant stress dysregulates your system, making anxious thoughts bigger and harder to manage. Something as basic as getting enough rest, fueling your body with proper meals, and regulating your nervous system through breathwork, stretching, or a walk outside can drastically lower vulnerability to imposter feelings. When cortisol is high and the body is exhausted, Even small challenges feel impossible. When your body is nourished and rested, your brain can process setbacks more rationally. So, next time imposter syndrome hits, check in with your physiology first. Am I tired? Am I hungry? Am I dysregulated? Often, caring for the body creates the stability to challenge the mind. So, cognitive reframing, keeping an evidence log, leaning on your mentorship and community, practicing self-compassion, and checking in on your physiology. Each one addresses imposter syndrome from a different angle: thoughts, memory, connection, emotions, and the body. The more you practice them, the more you build a toolkit that makes imposter feelings manageable, so they don't stop you from showing up fully as the performer that you are. Before we wrap up, I want to invite you to pause for a moment and really check in with yourself. Think about this. What would you say to a friend who came to you and said, "I feel like a fraud, I don't think I belong here, I'm not good enough"? You probably wouldn't say, "Yeah, you're right." You'd reassure them. You'd remind them of their strengths, their hard work, and the way you've seen them show up. Now, can you say that same thing to yourself? That's often the hardest step because imposter syndrome thrives off of self-criticism. But just for today, try turning that kindness inward. If you've got a journal or even just your phone, here is a quick prompt. Write down 3 moments where you've proved to yourself that you do belong. They don't have to be big. It could be a teacher's compliment, a role you landed, or even the fact that you're still here showing up and doing the work. And if writing isn't your thing, here is a grounding check-in. Place your feet on the floor and take a deep breath and silently say to yourself, "I am learning, I am growing, and that is enough." This little reflection might feel simple, but these micro moments of self-compassion are what start to chip away at that imposter voice. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from today, it's this. Imposter syndrome doesn't mean you're not capable. It doesn't mean you don't belong. It simply means that you're human. Every performer, no matter how talented or experienced, has felt that same doubt at some point. What matters is how we respond and the tools we build to remind ourselves that we do deserve to be here. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you shared it with a friend or a classmate who might need to hear it too. These conversations land so much deeper when we talk about them together. And if you're listening on Spotify, please follow and rate the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Or even just leave me a quick comment. Honestly, it brightens my whole day knowing that these episodes are reaching you. I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Limitless Performing. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'll see you next week with another episode of the Limitless Performer Podcast.